Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 129 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. We've got a busy and jam-packed show ahead for you today. We'll be analyzing the news of Virginia Tech's fall semester plans, what that means for college football as a whole coming back in 2020. The class of 2021, the recruiting class, a lot of new commits. We'll also talk about the decommitment of Luttrell Neville. Plus, the men's basketball roster at Virginia Tech looks a little bit different. We'll talk about the departure of PJ Horn and what the Hokies might be doing with that extra roster spot. Episode 129 of the Tech Sideline Podcast gets underway right now. And with that, we say welcome back into the Tech Sideline Podcast. Whether you're watching live on Facebook, you're watching archived on YouTube, listening on SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts, however you consume the Tech Sideline Podcast, we are so glad you could join us as we record on this Tuesday morning, June the 9th. And it is so great to be back with all of you. We've got the best crew in the land here today. We've got our managing editor, Chris Coleman. We've got our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. And we have the best producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart, taking your Facebook Live questions for the end of the show right now. It's great to have you all with us. A reminder that the Tech Sideline Podcast is brought to you each and every week by the Fisher Law Firm. They're Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their office in Blacksburg, they are able to serve the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. Whether you are charged with driving under the influence or speeding, they realize that each case is important to the client. To date, the firm has defended more than 30,000 people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free. 1-800-680-7031 is the number. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031. Or you can email them at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, it is great to be looking across and seeing Will, looking to my left, seeing Chris, looking to my right, seeing Malcolm. How are you all doing as we record here in the first week of June?
I'm doing fine. Malcolm, can I have the camera, please? Evan, if you thought you were going to get away without talking about your All-American status, you are wrong. We went over the whole plan for the show, and it did not include Evan bragging about being named All-American. So tell us all about that. Who was the organization that did it? Kind of run through it for us.
Well, thank you guys, because it wouldn't be possible without you guys at TSL and, the opportunities that you guys have both given me. So I'm appreciative of the article that was written. It was all just it was a fun day. So the Sportscasters Talent Agency of America, STAA, is the organization that puts this on. It's run by a gentleman by the name of John Chalesnik out in California. He's a former broadcaster, and basically they help broadcasters with their forums, their message boards, find open jobs, and then they provide Instagram live Q&As with broadcasters and ways to get better. And so they're just a terrific organization, and they host the Jim Nantz Award every year to recognize the top.
It's about a 12-year-old award, is that right?
Yes, yeah. Sir. This was the 12th year that they did it. And
to recognize
the nation's top collegiate sports broadcaster.
This is the entire country, folks. And this means that if you're a broadcaster, you're going up against some pretty phenomenal schools. Syracuse is probably the best top to bottom, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of Syracuse versus the field.
Yeah. There were a lot of. I tell you what, I've gotten to know a lot of Syracuse. But I always tell people Syracuse kind of is the equivalency of Alabama football, right?
When it comes to sports broadcasting.
Yes.
So what other schools are some of the top? I know Northwestern is written.
Yep. So Syracuse, Northwestern. Arizona State is a program
Pretty
that's
strong.
Really rising in the winter. Scotty Gaines is from Arizona State. A lot of the SEC schools, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, all have pretty good communications programs. But, Syracuse has Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, Bill Roth, Sean McDonough. The list goes on and on of Syracuse.
So this is the Heisman Trophy of student sports broadcasting, and Evan came in second. He's better at his craft than Michael Vick was as a freshman.
Michael Vick only finished third.
That's right.
Right.
So it's wow, man. I mean, whew. So what does that mean? Like those people all get jobs, right? People that place like that. I mean,
Personally, I think the voting was flawed this year anyway because we didn't get to finish baseball season, and that's one of Evan's true talents right there.
Right. Yeah.
I will say I was really lucky. I got to do the Bryant baseball series the last 2 days of February, the first day of March. So I was actually able to throw that on my reel, which I was really lucky. But I mean, there's some really good talent. I had no idea. So they do a 1 through 20. And the top 6 are all Americans, they call, and then there's about 15 honorable mention.
Right.
And I was honestly just really going into it hoping that I would place because I knew, for our growing sports media and analytics program, I really wanted to have a Hokie. Bailey Angle placed 13th in 16 and 17. Danny Noakes, who was a student broadcaster in 15, got 15th. But I wanted to try and get Tech back on that list, and so to be number 2, which was. I had no expectations of that whatsoever.
That's phenomenal. I mean, I know you're good and I know you're talented, but to understand that you're that good on a national level is really phenomenal. I remember when we met. It was at BW3's. Is that right?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Bill Roth is like, you got to come out and you gotta have dinner and you got to meet this kid, man. He's coming in and we'll see if we can get him to work with you. And I guess we had a podcast back then.
Well, actually, so it's really we met, and then one of my favorite things I remember, it was one of the last days that I was in school my freshman year, and I got a text from Bill at like 11:30 at night and said, "Hey, I think Will in TSL might be looking for a podcast host. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yes, please do whatever. Can you help connect that because I would love
because that's
to do
something
that."
you weren't doing at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I just would love. I was like, oh my god, to work for Tech Sideline and to work with you guys, and so thank you to everybody who reached out. It's meant a lot. It's meant a lot for our program, and hearing Bill talk about, we've had high school talent follow him on Twitter that he didn't know about that are that's
so
what it's all about.
It's definitely helping out Bill's program, and Bill's program became a major this year.
Yes,
yeah.
sir. Yep. So we're thrilled, and I can't thank you guys enough because doing this twice a week, and it's helped me, and so.
So let's settle it here. You going pro early? You're coming back for your senior?
Of course, I'm coming back. Of course, I'm not going. I've got a long ways to go still.
He hasn't hired an agent yet.
I've got another year. I mean, I've got more TSL podcast to host.
Evan wants to win a championship.
I'll leave it with a smile on my face there.
So congratulations to you, man.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. That was not planned, so I appreciate you.
It was hard to keep that information to ourselves.
Yeah, because your mom told us like the day or two before.
Your mom actually hit us up on Facebook and was like, "One of you guys call me, please." And I called her and I found out about it, and I'm like, "Cool, I'll write up the article tomorrow and have it ready to post."
Yeah, we had it already.
Well, so actually, they did the top 6 on CBS Sports HQ, which is different. It's typically a YouTube pre-recorded show. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they did that at 3:45. You're supposed to have it at 4 o'clock, but because the NBA season was coming back, they delayed it 45 minutes. So I'm sitting there for an hour.
Yeah, we noticed.
Yeah, it was a long wait, but actually they had reached out to Hokie Vision and ACC Network and Eric Fry the week before, and Damian Souse heard about it, reached out to my mom, and they were worried that because of my cell reception, for those that don't know, back in Richmond, I have no Wi-Fi.
Where are you going, a gas station or something like that?
We actually went to the office to watch. So anyways, it was really cool the reason I bring that up was because I have the Facebook notifications on for Tech Sideline because we used to do the Facebook Live on my phone before this awesome set, and I saw my mom send a private message. And I was like, why in the world? But I just, for some reason, didn't click on it. So I'm, in hindsight, very glad that I did not click on that private message because I would have found out the day before.
Now, she knew that Evan was not the winner, correct? She knew he was All-American.
She knew he finished probably second or third, I think what she told me.
Yeah.
Anyways, it all worked out. And enough about me because we've got a busy look at all this for those on Facebook. We've got how many? Three,
we got
4 whole pages.
3 whole pages.
And we even have a sheet of large print here.
Look at that.
Yeah,
for guys like me.
And that's also on our Twitter at Tech Sideline right now, by the way. One of those that you can go look at on social media. But
so let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Thank you guys. And again, it's great to be back. It's almost been a month since we've done a show. So we've got a lot to get through. We're going to talk about Virginia Tech football recruiting. We're going to talk about some good, some bad, what the 2021 class is looking like. We're also going to talk about the Virginia Tech men's basketball roster. But we begin with news yesterday out of the university, and that was President Tim Sands and Virginia Tech announcing that students will return on time. The semester will begin in 2020 on August 24th. It'll conclude on December 16th. classes will be online after Thanksgiving break. But there was a part of that release that kind of talked about sports, and I'm basically going to summarize it how Chris put it in the article yesterday. Basically, we still don't have all the information at this point,
right.
And there wasn't a ton of information released. But based off of that release, what you wrote up, what did you take away from President Sands and what it means for athletics this fall?
It means they're definitely going to have a football season for sure. I mean, if you can have an academic year with students on campus, then you can have football season. And that really was worrying me back in March and April that football season wouldn't happen. There was a time where I've gone back and forth between thinking it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. Fortunately, it's going to happen. Now, we just don't know. The main thing right now is when it's exactly going to start, what is the schedule going to look like? Because you don't necessarily know that each one of those games is going to get played. That part is still an unknown. You don't know how many people are going to be allowed in Lane Stadium. Obviously, Virginia Tech is a state school that is going to follow state guidelines. And right now, we are in phase 2, and the state guideline is no more than 50 people in a group gathering, right?
I believe that's indoors, though.
Okay.
I don't know, though.
Okay, so if I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
Public indoor gatherings. I don't
because I know that my daughter's going to have her high school graduation on the 26th of June.
Oh, yeah?
And they're going to put them in Radford High's football stadium.
Okay.
And they're going to put them on both sides and distance families from each other.
Okay.
And it's going to be, they're going to put the students on the field 6 feet apart from each other, which is kind of a bummer.
Right. Well,
we'll see how long that lasts.
Even then, think about for Virginia Tech when you've got indoor club sections and the press box and everything like that. I mean, you would have to kick some of those people out, and they're big donors or media or whatever. So right now, if the season started tomorrow, I don't think they would allow a full capacity stadium in the state of Virginia, in my opinion. But what Babcock said in his town hall thing that he did on Friday night, that he thinks it'll be about another month before that gets decided.
They're going to give it as much time as they can.
Right. They're not going to come to a hard decision right now and say, oh, we're only going to allow 20% of the capacity, and then get to the start of the season and you're like, oh, everything's fine. We could, we could just let 100% of people in and it's all good. So there's still a lot of unknown. I think Tim Sands and the press release said really as much as they could possibly say right now.
Yeah.
Will, how important of a step was it a couple of weeks ago that President Sands signed off on allowing players to voluntarily come back for football workouts? Did you see that as a positive step in the right direction?
Sure, but a lot of schools are doing that, and I'll admit I haven't had a chance to watch the news really closely, but the 3 I've noticed are Oklahoma State. They had some players test positive. I think Alabama had 5 test positive. And Marshall had a couple of players and a staffer test positive. So I think the reaction there is to quarantine, because there's not, and I think these voluntary workouts will consist of smaller groups,
10 people. So they've moved Virginia Tech's weight room into the indoor practice facility.
Yeah.
So there's 10 people at a time working out in that massive indoor practice facility.
And they're spraying the equipment down, and that kind of stuff.
So
and that's good because that's actually like an open air environment, which
absolutely.
is better to being inside.
I'm sure it was a surprise to some people in this country to see players come back and test positive and things like that, and there's a tendency to get worried. But I follow European soccer heavily, and those leagues have either already started back up or they will start up within the next week or two, and players in the Premier League are testing positive, and then
so what does the team as a whole do when a player tests positive?
He leaves, and everybody else stays.
They keep
practices.
going, huh?
Yeah. It's full. You have to. Everything's going to go out of business over there in that league if you don't.
Yeah. So I don't think you can if 1 or 2 players test positive. I don't think you could shut the whole team down for 2 weeks. No. That's going to create chaos.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, but they were testing them all. Very regularly. If this, I don't know if it's every day, but it's at least every couple of days, and they all get tested. So,
and the WHO came out yesterday and said that the transmissions of people who are asymptomatic or people who have it but are asymptomatic transmitting it are very rare.
Right.
So I think that's an encouraging sign. If that becomes the prevailing thought, and that lets you set strategy and tactics, then that means, I remember reading the article about the 2 Marshall players, they were floored. They had no symptoms at all. So I think that if that's what you want to go with, that's what the WHO is saying today. Who knows what they're going to say tomorrow? Mm-hmm. That said, if you have 3 players test positive and they're completely asymptomatic, then you can decide you're going to do what the EPL is doing. You're going to quarantine them, and everybody else keeps going.
So one question I have, and I was thinking about this because I believe, and I don't want to misquote here, but when Whit Babcock spoke to media on Zoom, maybe about a month or a month and a half ago, he made some joke saying we'll play on the moon or something to play college football season, right?
They'll play on the moon in January, I believe, if they to play football season.
One of the things we're seeing a lot from universities right now is that all the students are going home after Thanksgiving and then not coming back till late January, in the event that the coronavirus does come back in the winter. Right. So my question is...
Well, there's going to be nobody at the Tech UVA game. No student section. That's what that's going to mean.
Right.
It's good. Yeah. I didn't even think about it.
So let me jump in here and say...
Virginia Tech's going to have no home field... not as much of a home field advantage for the UVA game. Yeah. I think Lane would be frothing at the mouth this year for that game to get the cutback, but it's not going to be that way.
So, I've got 2 kids in college. Malcolm, of course, goes to Tech, and my son Ronan goes to South Carolina. And they have adopted similar models where they're coming back at the regular time and the first semester's ending at the regular time. They're just not coming back to campus after Thanksgiving break. In Tech's case, I think that's 8 days of instruction and exams are after Thanksgiving. Some universities are starting early and they're finishing exams before Thanksgiving. So those are the 2 models that are being applied. And so there was a piece of news that came out yesterday. It was from Football Scoop, and I think they're fairly reliable. NCAA is close to approving an updated 2020 preseason schedule that could see teams begin mandatory workouts as soon as July 6th. And I think, we've heard many athletic directors and football coaches say we need 6 weeks. From the time we start till the time we're ready to play, it needs to be 6 weeks. Well, if your first game is very late August, early September, that's mid-July. Mm-hmm. But I think the reason you're seeing the July 6th date is because there are some universities that are starting classes earlier. Right. Let's say August 10th or something like that. Right. So that gives the players 1 month and then classes start. In the case of Virginia Tech, that's going to be, what is that? 6 or 7 weeks. And
conditioning also plays a factor. You don't know how many guys, like Fuente said Friday night during the town hall, he told the players, look guys, we're going to be able to tell when you come back whether you put in the work or not, especially from a conditioning standpoint. So some guys are not going to come back in as good a cardiovascular shape as some of the others. And you worry about, I think there's worry about soft tissue injuries, pulled hamstrings, and things like that because guys just probably haven't been running as much. Honestly, football players like to lift weights. Most of them don't like to run. Right. I can certainly vouch for that when I play football.
I think you just described people.
I think I just described people in general. I don't.
That's one of the best lines we've had on the podcast. We need to quote that.
I rarely run unless somebody makes me. So some guys are going to come back not in shape. I don't think you're not going to be able to, if you started camp or started practice in August or whenever, and you're running gassers, you're running 10 or 15 gassers right at the end of practice because you've been conditioning all summer. Right. I don't think you'll be able to do that right away. You start having a bunch of guys pull hamstrings, and that's disastrous. You know how those hamstring injuries can linger.
Yeah, so they're going to have to ease into it.
They're going to have to ease into it. So I think that's part of the reason for that July 6th date too, is to just get guys running again so they can gradually step it up throughout the course of the month.
Now, given, like we were just talking about, the different universities, not even just Virginia Tech, just trying to be mindful of, what could happen, in the winter months with coronavirus if it were to come back. Is there an added pressure, do you feel like, for college football and college sports for that matter to start on time when the weather is still warm before that, instead of college football maybe getting pushed back to October like that had been thrown around before?
Maybe it'll matter for the Big Ten, and maybe it'll matter for some ACC schools. Won't matter for the SEC. it's going to stay warm down there all football season.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Missouri. I don't know much about Missouri weather.
Yeah, that was a question you brought up before we started the podcast, and it's a good question, and it makes sense. You know, if you're trying to keep your students away after Thanksgiving, you want to keep your you want to keep your student athletes away too, as much as you can.
Right. So, but the thing is, the regular season ends 2 days after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So they have to come back. Yeah.
Well, it's
or
not
stay.
They stay. They just they never go home for Thanksgiving.
They've always
anyway.
stayed during Thanksgiving.
Right.
So I think the last thing that we can, because we've got some good things to talk about, some fun news about recruits coming in. We're going to talk about recruiting class for football. We're going to talk about the roster for men's basketball. Let's kind of close out this conversation with this. We don't have all the answers, as we just talked about, at all. But at this point, June 9th, how do you guys feel college football will look in the fall? Do you think that we'll see full capacity in the stands, 50%, not just Lane Stadium, across the country? Do you think the schedule will get modified at all?
I think something's going to be different. I just don't know what yet. I think schedules will get modified for certain schools probably. Now, the thing about Virginia Tech this year is Virginia Tech doesn't have any long road trips, unless you count Middle Tennessee State a long road trip, right?
Interesting.
That's a good point.
I think the timing of this for Virginia Tech is extremely unfortunate. Like from a home schedule perspective, why couldn't this have happened last year when not as many people were interested in coming to games anyway?
When Penn State was not on the schedule.
Penn State, Miami, Virginia, Georgia Tech, all in Lane Stadium this year.
You know, yes, it is June 9th, and you know, it's almost 3 months until football season actually starts. So I don't see, at this point in time, I don't see a full capacity stadium. But, you know, that could change during the season.
Right.
It could change before the season, but it could also change during the season. I think what you see first week isn't necessarily what you're going to see the entire season.
You're exactly right. That might certainly be the case. It'll be interesting. I actually wish one of the foreign soccer leagues would decide to open up at full capacity, just so we could get some data for college football season here. Yeah, you know.
I think somebody else is probably going to go first.
Right. Yeah. Who? Nope. Does anybody want to be first? Right.
Yeah.
Now the German soccer league, the Bundesliga, they were the first to come back. They were the brave souls that came back first, but they
have cardboard cutouts
they have
in
cardboard
the stands.
Cutouts in the stands, right?
Korean baseball has stuffed animals.
Yeah, oh my goodness, yeah. So who's going to be the first to open at full capacity?
Yeah.
That's really hard to say. The thing is about the European soccer leagues is they're just going to restart their season here right now, which means the start of next season is actually going to be delayed probably until September. Instead of normally it's in early August.
Huh.
So I don't know if we're going to be able to get that outside data, unfortunately. But yeah, I could definitely see a situation where schools are like, okay, it's not going to be full capacity at the beginning of the season. Maybe we'll gradually ramp it up. So you might get a partial refund because you aren't allowed into the Penn State game, but by the time we're at North Carolina this year, but by the time the
Georgia Tech,
well, yeah, whatever. But by the time that game rolls around, they're allowing maybe, I don't know, a higher percentage into the stadium. The thing is, like, people are talking 20, 25, 30, 50. As far as I'm concerned, if you let 50% in, you might as well let 100 in. I mean, those seats in Lane Stadium were designed in the 1960s. They haven't changed. People are bigger than they were in the 1960s, of course. So even with a seat between you, I mean,
you're close.
You're close. It'd be somebody sitting right there. I mean, this is probably the size of a seat in Lane Stadium right here.
Well, one thing too, and I mentioned this, bring this up quick before we wrap up. A lot to talk about football too, but I also wonder about what this all means for fall sports in general. What does this mean for volleyball, women's soccer, men's soccer, all of those fall sports? We're talking a lot about football. What does that mean for the non-revenue?
I've said before, and my dad pointed this out to me. He's more concerned about going to basketball games in Castle Coliseum than he would be to an outdoor event in Lane Stadium.
Right.
Castle is in the winter. Those concourses are so narrow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually, it's so packed in those concourses after a full crowd in Castle that I've actually been late to player interviews because I can't get downstairs in time. That's how packed it is.
So there's a growing school of thought that it's indoors is worse than outdoors. And I can't find the term. I know we've got a message board poster, Steve in Baltimore, who's been with us forever, and he posts frequently on this that in open air, the moisture tends to dissipate, whereas in a closed space, there's a growing school of thought that transmission is much more likely if you're in a closed space with the same people for an extended period of time, as opposed to just passing by people in open air or even being around the same people in open air. So hopefully we'll get more data on that and they'll figure more things out there. But
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason that, they open restaurant and bars outdoors first.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Great conversation. As we said, we don't have all the answers. We're just trying to provide as much insight and commentary on the matter as we can.
And I will say, every time we talk about it, we do get emails. Like, you guys shouldn't have said that. Okay, I'm trying.
We're bringing some new conversation here as we're going to take a time out here on the Tech Sideline podcast. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the 2021 recruiting class. We're going to talk about some commits that have happened over the last month. We'll talk about the decommitment of Luttrell Neville. And in a little bit, we'll talk about the men's basketball roster. You're watching and listening to the Tech Sideline podcast brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back into episode 129 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We are recording on Tuesday morning, June 9th, and we're so glad that you could be with us here at TechSideline.com. Evan Hughes, Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, and the best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, taking your Facebook Live questions. Right now, we will actually get to them throughout the show a little bit too, and at the end, of course, as always. Transitioning now from talking about what the upcoming college football season could look like to players that will be wearing a maroon uniform sometime soon or an orange uniform sometime soon. We're going to talk about the 2021 recruiting class. I want to spend the first part talking about Luttrell Neville, and then we could talk about the commits that have happened over the last month. This happened last week. Luttrell Neville, who was once a 4-star receiver, and I believe Will tweeted this on Tech Sideline, had actually been bumped down to a 3-star over the last couple of weeks, decommitted from Virginia Tech last week. This comes after he sort of reaffirmed his commitment on social media a couple of weeks ago, tweeting the hokey or the turkey emoji. Will, what were your initial reactions when you saw the decommitment?
Well, he when he first committed, he credited his relationship with Demetrius Davis as being a big part of that. And I remember the quote was something like, "They being Virginia Tech, has figured out the hard part. They got the quarterback, and then the rest you can fill in around it." And so when Davis decommitted, it was you kind of figured that Neville would decommit shortly thereafter, and he didn't. He reaffirmed.
I texted Will when it happened, and I said, I'm surprised it took him so long. I expected that to happen 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah. So he's clearly trying to figure things out, and I think they got to him in the interim and said some things to him to keep him on board for a while, but I believe that is no more current commits from the state of Texas, correct? Right. Yeah.
And when the Texas to VT movement happened, we said at most it had a 2-year shelf life.
Right.
Turned out to be 1 year, 1.5 years maybe.
And they're still working on some guys.
And right, you never know what will happen at the end of the cycle, because we did not know about Alec Bryant and Robert Wooten until late November last year.
Yeah. Yep.
So. Yeah. So you never know what will happen between now and signing.
Well, and just because the Texas VT movement is down right now doesn't mean that those connections that Bo Davidson and Justin Fuente have from that state of Texas won't be there. Class of 2022,
the connections are always going to be there, but it's really, really, really hard to get a guy who has a lot of closer options to go that far away. Like I'm from Virginia. I'm from Danville, Virginia, originally, and let's throw Virginia Tech out of the picture because I'm biased. If Texas A&M offered me, and man, I really like Texas A&M, it's great, but you know what, man, Georgia Tech, NC State, Clemson, they all offered me too, and that's a lot closer than Texas A&M, right? So I would not go to Texas A&M. I couldn't do it because it's so far away.
Yeah,
and
there's so many good Power 5 options down there in
right,
Texas.
Yeah.
Now that said, there are also a lot more players, you know, and Virginia Tech had a lot of success early in Frank Beamer's tenure with getting players out of Florida because I think the perception was, first of all, there were a lot of players in Florida.
Yep.
And secondly, the big programs were Florida State, Miami, and Florida. I'm not even sure UCF and USF were
they
Division
weren't
1A at the time.
I'm not sure they were either. I forget the year. I forget the year UCF joined. I think they were the first, but yeah. It was
so there were 3 schools, and they could take maybe 75 players, and there were a lot more players than that in the state of Florida.
Absolutely.
You know? I don't know that that's really the case with Texas. We could count up the number of good schools down there. There's 4, 5, 6 schools down there.
Well, on the last couple of podcasts we've done in the past, we've talked about at one point it looked like this recruiting class had a ceiling potentially of getting top 20. And you know, Chris, we've had these conversations about how the numbers don't necessarily matter in the rankings, but just as a whole, when you look at the players that are in this 21 class, how do you view it right now compared to maybe when we talked about it in March, April, or May?
Well, it's ranked in the low 50s right now. When Davis decommitted, he took a chunk out of that ranking all by himself.
Yep.
And part of it is they just don't have a lot of commits, you know, and other programs do. I have not sat and analyzed the average recruit ranking, but if you look at the composite rankings, there are no 4 stars or 5 stars in this group for Virginia Tech. And to crack that really top 30, top 25, top 20, you got to have some 4-star guys. And so if they're not going to get 4 stars on board and they're not going to get, 20, 25 guys in this class, it's not going to wind up being a highly ranked class.
Yeah.
So I'll put it at that. And but you're right. It looked like at one point that it was building momentum, and that's what it could possibly be.
It's really not too surprising. I mean, generally speaking, these days it's the schools with the bigger budgets that have recruiting success that can hire. Like, North Carolina hired Auburn's director of recruiting away. I mean, North Carolina outbidding Auburn for a big-time recruiter. Virginia Tech, I believe in Justin Fuente's first 3 years, was the only school in the country to sign a top 30 recruiting class with a budget of under $100 million. Wow.
Yeah, Chris did a research recently.
So over the course of Fuente's tenure at Virginia Tech, he has actually done more with less on the recruiting trail. And I think the reasons behind that is everybody assumed at the time, why didn't Virginia Tech get a recruiting bump in Justin Fuente's first few years like most coaches do? I think we're learning now that he did get that recruiting bump. Yeah. And that as everybody else has increased their resources being thrown into recruiting, Virginia Tech has not, at least not at the level, and they haven't kept up with the Joneses, so to speak, as far as that goes. And I think we're seeing the results of that now.
Yeah.
I mean, Virginia Tech is bottom 3rd in Power 5 schools in revenue.
And I can hear it now. There are other factors that Bud Foster had 1 foot out the door, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, there's been a lot of things happen to this program recently.
Yeah, there is no one reason why things happen.
Everybody
has their pet reason, their favorite reason.
Right.
But
the reality is, it's a combination of all of them.
Yeah,
it's an impressive stat right there, by the way, that you found about the resources and the recruiting class. That's
let me go ahead and drop these on the podcast
Please.
Right now. It's University of North Carolina. You ever heard me talking about that this morning? So everybody's wondering what advantages UNC has. So UNC has a $240 million athletic endowment.
Virginia Tech is $65 million.
Right. And so that means every year UNC pulls out over $11 million from their endowment to pay for scholarships.
And the average scholarship bill is $14 to $17 million. So when you're pulling 11 off of an endowment, you're almost paying the full bill.
Well, they're paying 63%. Now they do have more sports, so they have more.
Yeah.
So right now they're paying 63% of their scholarship money through endowments.
And Virginia Tech's numbers are the scholarship bill is about $16 million, and their endowment brings in $2.5 million.
So that's an extra $8.5 million UNC has to play with every year over Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Now it's about to get even worse because this past October, the North Carolina Senate and Legislature passed a rule that says out-of-state student athletes at North Carolina schools can be counted as in-state students.
For tuition purposes.
So now UNC will not have to pay full tuition for out-of-state recruits. So that 63% is going to jump up, I don't know, to 80, 90, 95%.
More millions of dollars.
More millions of dollars available to hire away Auburn's recruiting staff from them. So there are massive advantages that UNC has over Virginia Tech that are completely out of Virginia Tech's control because the state legislature in North Carolina is willing to do things like that. Honestly, this was always a law in the state of North Carolina until 2010. So
what was always a law?
That they could count out-of-state students for in-state tuition.
Really? Until 2010?
Until 2010. It got reversed in 2010, and now it's back to the way it was before.
See, we just found this out this morning. It'd be interesting to do the research.
I guarantee you. So Mack Brown had his run at UNC in the late 90s with Cav and all that group. I'm guessing that law was on the books then. He gets back to the state of North Carolina and says, I can't do this anymore. You guys need to change the law. And they did it for them because it's, UNC. Right?
And they probably have a lot of alums in the see, I'm just kind of shooting off the cuff here because we just found this out this morning. But you got to figure that not only is Mack an influential and persuasive guy, but there's probably a lot of UNC alums in the power structure of North Carolina politics. And
I mean, my goodness, if you have a $240 million athletic endowment, yes, there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so I know for a fact from a good source that posted on our board earlier today, nearly 50% of UNC's athletic donors are Rams Club members. I think it's what Rams Club.
I think it's called the Rams Club.
Nearly 50% of Rams Club members aren't even season ticket holders. They just donate.
Well, for Virginia Tech, there are now 17,000 Hokie Club members, and there are only something like 9,500 of them ranked in the Hokie Scholarship Fund ranking.
Okay.
So, we're
so we've reached that level.
But that's relatively new with Virginia Tech.
Right, and Virginia Tech has got a lot of people in this past year because they lowered the level to $25.
Yeah, so they're building for the future. They're getting people in at the lower
These
level.
guys at UNC have been there doing it for years and years and years.
This is true.
Well, let's transition to the commits at Virginia Tech. They've gotten quite a few actually over the last month since we done the last podcast. So we're going to throw some names out there. Chris and Will are going to give their thoughts, and I want to start with a familiar last name that'll bring a smile to Tech fans. That's Jaylen Strowman, committing to Virginia Tech, 3-star defensive back out of Patriot High School. Of course, the younger brother of the great Greg Strowman, who's with the Washington Redskins right now. The TSL article did a great job of showing the different brothers that have come through Virginia Tech, and now the Strowmans are Hokies. So, Will, I'll start with this. What were your thoughts when you saw Jaylen commit?
I think that Chris is much more tied into this stuff than I am, but Jaylen's probably a guy who is underrated.
I would agree with that.
When you sit there and say, he's a 3-star. I remember watching, to go back to Greg, I remember watching Greg's high school film, and I don't want to get carried away. He played a lot of quarterback, right? I remember just thinking,
read option quarterback.
Some of these highlights are Vic-like, man. That kid can really move.
Awesome athlete.
But he wasn't very big, and
160.
Jaylen, on the other hand, is
Jaylen. All right, so people are going to compare him to Greg because he's Greg's brother. He's not anywhere close. They're not similar as prospects.
Yeah.
Jaylen is much more like Terrell Edmonds in terms of physical stature and athleticism, in my opinion. He's going to play free safety, rover, or whip, in my opinion. He could play corner. Terrell Edmonds played 3 positions in his 3 years at Virginia Tech. He started off as a corner, then moved to rover, then moved to free safety.
Yeah.
I think you could see Jaylen Strowman move around during his career. I don't know what his ideal position is at this point, but
have
he's
you had
versatile.
a chance to watch his film?
Yeah.
And what do you see there? Like, I had the immediate question of, can he return punts?
No, I don't view him. Generally your punt returner is a smaller, quicker guy, whereas generally speaking, your kickoff returner might be more of a long strider, straight ahead speed. The guy who hits that hole and just goes straight ahead. if he was going to be a returner at Virginia Tech, I think he would be more likely to be a kickoff returner.
Do you have his size there?
I do. 6'1", 190.
Which is
that's
that's
a lot bigger than
Evans,
Greg.
Yeah. I mean,
so he is the number 17 recruit in Virginia according to 247 Sports, number 19 recruit in the state according to their composite rankings.
I mean, he's bigger right now than Greg is right now, and Greg's an NFL player.
I wonder, do you wonder, Chris, if that's a case of Strowman's not higher ranked because he's just not playing the recruiting game? You know, wasn't that the case with the Edmonds where they were underrated because they just, you know.
Probably. Trey was the highest rated of those three because he was the first. Yeah. And so, you know, sometimes like you just know where you're going to go, so maybe you don't go to as many camps, or people are like, oh, I'm not even going to bother to recruit that guy because we know where he's going to school. The other reason I like Jaylen is the people he's been around. Greg is one of Virginia Tech's favorites. He's one of Ben Hilgert's favorites. He's one of Justin Fuente's favorites, and the feeling is mutual for coming from Greg. Also, his work ethic was incredible, top notch. So Jaylen has basically been living with Greg, who has an in-home gym. He's even installed field turf in his backyard, I think, or something like that.
Wow!
So it's basically Greg Strowman, Tim Settle, who
who also has
a phenomenal work ethic. So the guys that have surrounded Jaylen, and he actually said Ben Hilgert reminds him of his dad, just the way he pushes people and things like that. So I think
in a good way, right?
yeah. I mean, I think he's been surrounded by the right kind of people, and he'll come into the program immediately understanding how to work. He will be physically ready and mentally capable, I think, of contributing right away when he gets to Virginia Tech. I still want to redshirt him. We haven't used that word yet today. So,
ABR.
Yeah.
I was thinking in the back of my mind, how can I somehow bring redshirt in? But knowing we're talking about recruiting today, somehow that word was going to be dropped. Let's transition from Jaylen Strowman to 3-star running back, class of 2021 from Dorman High School in South Carolina, Chance Black, 6'1", 190-pound running back, someone who had over 1,000 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, 166 carries last year, and he also caught nearly 400 yards out of the backfield. Versatile back.
Yeah, they like him because they'll be able to line him up anywhere. You put him out on the field, and the defensive coordinator isn't sure which package to run because they don't know if he's going to line up in the slot or as a running back or out wide or whatever. And that's the type of versatile guys that Justin Fuente likes. Obviously, you could do that with Dalton Keene,
right?
James Mitchell to a certain extent, Sam Rogers, and that really helps you offensively in terms of game planning and things like that. So he's got a good set of hands on him, in my opinion. He's kind of the long strider type. He
struck me as a one-cut kind of guy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
You'll like this too. Wilt, Annalise, and run it. He also runs track. Finished 4th in the state of South Carolina in the triple jump.
So he's got some explosiveness to him. Yeah.
That was I think David Wilson was a triple jumper. Those guys got some hops.
Yeah.
And I believe, if memory serves correct, was he from the same high school as Dalen Wright, the receiver for class of 2020, or was that somebody?
Maybe Jacoby Pinckney went to that high school.
It might be Pinckney.
Yeah,
apologies.
Certainly did.
Yep. Yeah. So that's Chance Black, and interesting to see if he'll redshirt or not. But he's got the
redshirt. Yeah.
So they are cramming some running backs into the program. I think that's 10 on scholarship or something like that.
There won't be 10 by the time he gets here.
Yeah.
Again, this is all class of 2021. Let's transition now to the defensive side of the football. 3-star defensive end, class of 21 from Gilman High School in Baltimore, Maryland. Matthias Carroll committing to Virginia Tech. The other two finalists were Maryland and Duke.
Probably my favorite recruit of the class so far.
What size is he, Evan? Give us a size.
6'4", 220.
Right. And that's
now he was listed at 6'3".
He was listed at 6'3" by some sites and 6'5" by others.
Right.
I watched his commitment video on his Instagram Live the day he committed, and he said he was 6'4". And you see pictures of him next to Justin Fuente, and he looks 6'4". He was also a tiny little person compared to his father, who was 6'9".
Right.
So
is he done growing?
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a guy who could be 6'5" or more. I mean, his nickname is Stretch for a reason. He's got long arms.
Yeah.
This is one of those guys who is probably no chance he contributes in his first year, but he's going to be in the 250 to 260 range by his third year, and that's when he'll have a chance to take off. He is one of those ultimate high ceiling guys. I think the star ranking should be given for current ability and potential ability. His current ability would be about a 1 star. His potential ability, I think, is a 4 to 4.5 star range. I think he's one of those long-term guys that if he applies himself properly in the weight room and everything, he's going to be a really good player. He is a better prospect than some of the higher-ranked defensive linemen that you will see, which we'll get into in a few minutes, in my opinion.
And he also fits. I think he also fits the modern defensive model of going up against spread offenses.
Yeah.
Taller, rangier guys on the perimeter who can
get your hands up against those quick passes.
And you see, but you see that at UVA, guys like Snowden, that create a lot of trouble and just knocking down 1 or 2 passes a game can make a huge difference in a game. Yeah. If you're doing that on third down, it's funny because Virginia Tech fans, and this isn't a criticism, there's just the romantic notion of the Cornell Brown, Corey Moore types who come off the Bruce Smith types who come off the edge at 100 miles an hour, and that just really doesn't fit the modern game. We all want to see 16 sacks,
right?
But I'll take a guy that can hold up the perimeter, stop the run, clog the passing lanes, that kind of stuff. That more fits the modern game.
It's a different era, yeah. Remember for the next 10 years after Corey Moore, everybody was the next Corey Moore. Every recruit, this guy's the next Corey. Lamar Cobb's the next Corey Moore.
No, I think Lamar Cobb was. He was right after Corey.
Well, he started at stud the year after Corey Moore left. Right. He was. I'm like, I played against Lamar Cobb in high school, and he is not going to be the next Corey Moore.
I am afraid of Corey Moore, but I was not afraid of Lamar Cobb.
Right. I mean, Cobb was a solid player, but it's not the next Corey Moore, of course. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a different style of defensive end these days. I think Virginia Tech, their biggest issue this past year, I don't think was necessarily their size at defensive end. If you're going to be small, then you need to be quick and fast. So Virginia Tech needs to either get bigger or they need to get quicker. Now, ideally, you identify targets who make you bigger and quicker. If you can't get that, then you need to make sure they at least make you bigger or quicker, right? Carroll makes you bigger and quicker. He's an ideal defensive end prospect for Virginia Tech, in my opinion. There are some guys that have been higher ranked on the boards, on recruiting boards recently, that do not make you bigger or quicker. Landon Watson, who started out as a 4-star recruit, has since been demoted to 3 stars.
And switched to outside linebacker.
Listed at 6'3", on most of the recruiting sites, which is the same thing Carroll is listed at on some recruiting sites. But if you look at pictures of them next to Justin Fuente, Landon Watson is more like 6'1", and Carroll is more like 6'4". Yeah. Even though they're listed on some sites as the same height. So Landon Watson is one of those guys who does not make you bigger, and he may or may not make you quicker. I'm not 100% sure that he does that either.
Yeah.
So everybody's looking at him and saying, "Oh, 4-star recruit." Well, he used to be a 4-star.
4-star defensive end. He's actually kind of a 3-star outside linebacker.
Yes, you're right. But people, because honestly, recruiting services do rankings way too early before the whole picture gets out on these kids. Yeah. People are always going to view him as a 4-star defensive end and think he was Virginia Tech's top prospect, when in reality he is not. He does not make you bigger, and it's questionable that he makes you quicker, whereas Matthias Carroll does both.
So the bottom line is that Carroll was one of the top guys on Virginia Tech's board at defensive end. He's a guy they wanted, and they got him.
Right, and let's keep in mind here that you just hired a coach from the Buffalo Bills. So let's go ahead and trust him a little bit, right?
Well, let's read about in the article here that we put out about Matthias Carroll. Read this paragraph. In his commitment announcement on Instagram, Carroll cited new defensive line coaches Bill Tierlink and Darryl Tapp as big reasons for his commitment, as well as head coach Justin Fuente and defensive coordinator Justin Hamilton. He is also an All-American wrestler at the high school level, though he does not plan to wrestle at Virginia Tech.
It's
a big deal to be an All-American.
He's just going to bring those hand techniques.
So he's a tall guy with long arms with the ability to put on 40 or 50 more pounds, who understands leverage because of his days with wrestling. I mean, this guy is the ideal defensive end prospect for Virginia Tech. There's no guarantee that anything is going to work out, but if he stays the course, I would be surprised if it didn't work out for him.
Okay.
All right, and the last recruit that Tech has picked up, I'm excited to talk about Jaylen Miletich. Offensive lineman, class of 21.
Evan's done his homework. That's why he's an All-American.
I love that name, Jaylen Miletich. It just flows off the tongue very well. He's from Germany, but he was initially born in Serbia.
He is Serbian, and in a country like Serbia, they will most likely not have an American football league. So if you want to play American football, you have to go to France or Germany or England or somewhere like that if you're in Europe. So I'm guessing that's why he made the move to Germany.
Let me give a little bit of backstory real quick, because he's got an interesting story. You know, it's refreshing to get a different kind of recruit who's got just, comes from a different background. So he's 6'4", 290. Let's see, he had offers from UCF and ECU. Plans to play football in the United States as a senior, but he's been working closely, again, this is from our TechSideline.com article, which you can view on the website. He's been working closely with Bengals offensive line coach Paul Alexander. And he tweeted this when he
Paul
committed.
Alexander. Okay, you're talking about
the coach.
Okay.
Yeah, so Paul Alexander, the offensive line coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, says, quote, I'm saying it again loud in all caps and clear in all caps to all the D1 coaches, even top 10 football programs, he put in parentheses. Jaylen Miletich is the real deal. And 4 years from now, I will be retweeting this tweet and saying, I told you so.
I initially made fun of Bronco Mendenhall when he started signing Germans and Danes and things like that. I've actually bought into it because I think if you're trying to build a program based around culture, Wilfred Panay has not had anybody in his ear for the last 2 years telling him how great he is. And
this is the tight end from the class of 20s from France. Sorry, just to get some back.
From France.
And same thing with this kid. It's just those guys, they sacrifice everything to try to get a scholarship. I mean, Panay moved to the United States when he was 16 years old and had to learn a language. He had to learn the American language, the English language, while attending school in the United States and learning the game of football. That's a lot of dedication, and that's a lot of bravery, really, from a 16-year-old. You know? So guys who show that kind of dedication, and tell me how to pronounce his name.
Jaylen Miletich.
Jaylen Miletich.
He moves from Serbia to Germany, probably also at the age of 16. Yes, it's in Europe, but it's a different culture. It's a different language. So these guys are
sacrificing.
They're sacrificing.
He went Serbia to Germany to the United States.
Correct. Right. And you're not going to have any trouble out of these kids, and they are going to assimilate right in. And honestly, Europe is so small. It's so much more. That open border policy with the EU and everything. It makes for more cohesiveness as far as guys fitting in and guys making easier adjustments, I think. So these guys have they've shown the willingness to work and go above and beyond when it comes to realizing their football dreams. So I think these guys they're going to be really good culture fits. I don't know what I think about Miletich as a prospect yet. I think he got really strong hands. Really, really strong hands. I don't know about offensive line footwork or technique or anything like that. I have a blind spot there when it comes to evaluating recruits. I think Panay is really, really good prospect. I actually like him. I think he could be a great defensive end at Tech. But I think both of those guys will come in and they'll get the most out of their ability.
So that makes me think of I still remember Buzz Williams talking about JUCO guys and how they've had nothing.
Oh yeah,
and they appreciate everything they get.
Depending on the JUCO they go to, they might not even had AC in their locker room.
Yeah, and transfers also have gone through the whole high school thing and looked at the facilities and had smoke blown up their butts. But they've been through the process and they're more mature about it.
Well, that's why Virginia Tech's so good at recruiting transfers. Those guys know what's BS and what isn't. So when they get told the truth by Justin Fuente, they appreciate it.
And they're able to cut out all the noise. And make
Tech has a good chance of signing, bringing in another transfer this summer. I know they're recruiting that cornerback from Iowa really hard, who started a lot of games this past year as a freshman for Iowa and is now transferring, former 4-star recruit.
Yeah,
And I think Tech has a really, really good chance with him. I forget his name off the top of my head. I just found out about him last night or the day before.
My brain says Johnson, but
I think that's right. Yeah. But it's guys who have been the process before, and they know the information that's important and the information that's not important. And 16 and 17-year-old recruits that they don't know.
DJ Johnson.
All right, I got the Johnson part right.
You did. Yeah, he's in the transfer. That's May 22nd, 2020 article written on SI.com. So let's do this. One more question. Malcolm actually gave us one. I don't know who it's from, but there was a question about these 3 prospects for the class of Jacob S. Yates. Thank you for the question, Jacob. Jacob wants to know about Naquan Brown, Landon Watson, who we touched on, and then Taj Bullock, who is the 6'4" dual threat quarterback from New Jersey.
I'll stand on what I already said about Landon Watson. Naquan Brown's a really interesting prospect. I think he's got elite quickness. If he plays defensive end in college, he obviously does not have elite size, but he does fit one of the 2 metrics there that I think Virginia Tech is using or is possibly using for recruiting defensive ends in the future. He doesn't make you bigger right now, but he does make you quicker, most certainly quicker. I don't know what his ceiling is as far as how much weight he can put on. But I do think he can be an effective player in some role for Virginia Tech. His size is what gives me pause.
He's listed at 6'3", 205. I don't really see the 6'3".
I've seen him in a picture like next to Demetrius Davis, who's 5'11", 200, and a really thickly built guy. And Brown didn't look more than 6'1" in the picture, if that. And he was skinnier. He's just, for a defensive end at this point in his development, he's kind of a frail guy. But like I said, elite quickness off the edge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, and who was the last
Taj Bullock.
Taj Bullock. The funny thing is, Virginia Tech has now offered over 300 guys for this class. It's too many guys for me to keep up with, so I generally don't start focusing on guys until I know that they're a top target.
Yeah, so let me jump in here and say that the 2 quarterbacks, and Chris can correct here if I'm wrong, the 2 quarterbacks they're really on right now are Bullock and
not on the Texas guy anymore.
And not Lucas Coley.
No, okay. I think once they offered Bullock, they've gone all in on him.
Interesting.
So
because Coley's going to commit Thursday.
Well, you can't get a kid from Texas to visit right now anyway. Right. So what's the point? Yeah.
And information on Bullock. So 6'4", 223, 3-star quarterback according to 247sports.com.
Number 17 dual threat QB in the country, I think.
Yes, and then there's a 17 next to dual on his name.
So I didn't realize until today that he was Virginia Tech's top target at quarterback.
Okay.
Until sometime this morning.
Got some intel hot off the presses.
Right.
So for perspective, Demetrius Davis, I think, is the number 6 dual threat QB in the country, and Coley, who they also recruited, was number 19, and you slot Bullock in at 17.
So because Virginia Tech has offer so many guys these days, which means I can't focus on individual players until it becomes I become aware that they're top prospects.
So somebody gets in here and says...
So I haven't had a chance to evaluate him yet because I just found out today that he was a top target. But he's got Gerard Evans' size, and Rutgers is his other top school, and I completely trust Greg Schiano's evaluation skills, especially for New Jersey players, which is where he's from.
Right.
And Greg, by the way, has really built up the recruiting staff there at Rutgers.
Absolutely, yeah.
We've talked about that before.
Greg Schiano, at one point, after when Beamer's retirement was being discussed and everything, I thought Greg Schiano would have been an excellent choice for Virginia Tech.
Former NFL head coach.
Just a good
Mid-Atlantic, knows the Mid-Atlantic really well. So I trust his evaluation as well as Justin Fuente's evaluation, and those seem to be the 2 players here in his recruitment.
The only ones that are warm on this list, Rutgers is the first on that list warm, and then Tech is second
I think
warm.
That's just an alphabetical thing.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yep. And recruited by Brad Cornelson and Jafar Williams are his 2 primary recruiters, and then everybody else is cool on that list.
And I don't know when he's going to decide, but I think Virginia Tech at least has a puncher's chance there.
So it sounds like Coley will be off the board to somebody else on Thursday, and then it'll be down to Bullock. And you're right. I couldn't, in going through Bullock's Twitter feed, I couldn't see where he had said anything about when he was going to come in.
He fits the mold, man. I've got to watch his tape. I haven't done it, but 6'4", 225 or 230.
That's 240 in college.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like I said, he's going to be Gerard Evans' size.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea about him as a passer or anything like that. But like I said, I trust Fuente's evaluation. I trust Greg Schiano's evaluation. I've never been worried about quarterback recruiting in this class. I think Demetrius Davis is an elite prospect who, if things fall correctly, has the chance to possibly be a Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, I think he's that good. But I think I think Virginia Tech's system, Virginia Tech always gets good quarterback play. The only time Justin Fuente and Brad Cornelson haven't got good quarterback play is Ryan Willis for the first 3 games of his senior season.
Yeah.
That's probably...
he didn't let him know he was hurt.
Right, that was part of it, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's on Willis, probably. I mean, he's the only quarterback that hasn't been able to perform consistently for those guys. That's on Willis. So I trust Virginia Tech to find a quarterback, either somebody that's in the program now, a high school kid they'll develop. They do very well with transfers, obviously. Yeah. So I'm just not worried about the quarterback position, whether it's Bullock or whether it's somebody else later. I think Tech will be fine there.
As always, we'll keep you posted on TechSideline.com, social media, Tech Sideline on Twitter. Any recruits, anybody getting close, we've got you covered. And, we are at about that hour point, and typically that's when I said we got to wrap it up a little bit.
You might hear my stomach growling on this microphone. In a few
we have, as we cross at noon, we have gotten the green light to go over an hour. Sometimes we get messages, why do you guys stop at an hour? Chris and Will.
Well, when you're only doing them every 2 or 3 weeks, you should really make them longer.
Yeah, but we've got the green light to keep going. So we've got more content coming to episode 129, Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. And let's transition quickly, football to basketball, and then we'll get to questions on Facebook Live with Malcolm. So over the last month or so, we've had some new players come on to the Virginia Tech men's basketball roster. Of course, the headline is P.J. Horn entered the transfer portal, very quickly committed to Georgia. That is his home state. I believe he's from Tifton, Georgia, if memory serves correct. But P.J. Horn, Jonathan Kabongo, who I guess technically was a medical redshirt last year, is no longer on the roster as well. So that leaves Wabisa Beatty, Tyrese Radford, the only Buzz Williams holdovers currently on the Virginia Tech roster. But they've got out and they've got the Pemsel guy from Iowa, Cordell Pemsel. Mm-hmm. What have you guys made of the offseason for Mike Young and how the roster looks right now on June 9th?
I think there's 7 guys on this list that were big contributors this past year. Beatty, Couture, Naheem Aline, Jaylen Cone, John Ogiaco, Tyrese Radford. So that's just 6. And Aluma redshirted this past year.
Correct, because he was transferring.
There's going to be a lot of new faces, which isn't too surprising. I mean, when Mike Young took over, he had 4 scholarship players. And there's always, generally speaking, going to be a lot of roster turnover that first 2 years in basketball. You can afford to do that in basketball. I mean, because it doesn't take you it won't take you more than 2 years to get all your guys in the program,
right?
Most likely, because there's only 13 scholarship players. There's room for one more with Horn going. Horn, apparently, from what I read, it was just like his family has had some issues with the coronavirus, and he wants to be closer to them because travel is uncertain and everything like that. I mean, if his parent, let's say his mom wants to come see him play in Blacksburg, and what if half the hotels around here have students in them again? I'm serious. And there's a cap percentage on the rest of the hotels that don't. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'm just speculating here. So. Yeah. I'm good with that. I mean, P.J. Horn's done nothing but represent Tech in a good way over the years. He's a good dude, always been a good teammate. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah, the response to his announcement that he was transferring from Virginia Tech fans was overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah. Everybody likes P.J. Horn. He's a good guy. Now, that being said, from a basketball standpoint, you've got John Ogiaco, you've got Aluma, and you've got Pemsel, and you've got 3 guys plus Gisan. You've got 4 new players going to be
6'9" and up. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Maybe 6'8" with Gisan, but who knows? Whatever. You got a lot more size now. Like Gisan's a natural 4 in Mike Young's system, but Aluma can play both. Pemsel could probably play both if he needed. Ogiaco is obviously a 5. I don't think P.J. Horn was going to play very much this year.
Yeah, if he had kept making his 3-pointers, maybe, but his production beyond the arc fell way off.
It did. Like it's no coincidence that those 2 or 3 games where he got really, really hot, or Virginia Tech won those games.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think there's any coincidence there at all.
So
I don't think he was going to play as much this year. That's my take on it. I don't know anything about Georgia's roster, but
they do have Tom Crean as their coach, the old Indiana coach.
Yeah, for sure. But I would anticipate him probably playing the 4 for Georgia rather than the 5. That would make a lot of sense. I just don't think that really affects Virginia Tech's abilities on the court this season, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so either. And they've got so many pieces here that can see the floor. Cartier Diarra, he's a guy that and we he's to me he's an interesting case because he's a very he's a playmaker, he's a slasher, he can get to the rim, but he's going to turn it over a lot too.
And
we'll see if Mike Young can cure him of that.
Yeah, but he'll play in a more constructive offense now. I think Mike Young's offense. I need to go back and study the number.
You think by its nature,
you're going to turn the ball over less. Yeah. Yes,
as opposed to just yelling at guys when they throw it away.
Right. Well, a lot of offenses come from, a lot of turnovers come from guys just trying to make individual plays, right?
Yeah.
And ideally, in the Mike Young offense, the system is the point guard, right? The system makes the plays. Yeah. So there's going to be fewer turnovers. I mean, Virginia Tech was one of the best teams in the country in turnovers this past season, despite having so many freshmen and despite even your upperclassmen being new to the system. I mean, it was amazing.
If he can keep this group together,
right?
Not just next year, but the year after, I think it's pretty amazing what you're going to see from a turnover standpoint.
They're going to have a lot of cohesiveness of playing together so many minutes on the court, and that's going to help a lot too. Again, I have to go back and study his numbers from his years at Wofford to see where his team's ranked in turnovers. But I think the offense itself is going to bring Diarra, I guess that's how you pronounce it. Diarra.
I don't know. We'll have to look it up and start getting it right.
You got the first one. Cartier is definitely the first name. But I think the offense itself is going to help him limit his turnovers.
So with P.J. Horn transferring and that open roster spot, Adam Zagoria back on June 1st. Adam, New York Times Sports. There's this grad transfer from Delaware. His name is Justin Mutz.
We need a Mutz on the team.
He averaged 12 points per game, 8.4 rebounds per game last year. Started his career at High Point, Delaware last year. He's immediately eligible with 2 years left as he graduated in 3 years. I do not have the size available.
If he's averaging over 8 rebounds a game, at the very least, he's a small forward.
But they say forward. And then there was an article written, Chris Arvin says that Virginia Tech is prioritizing grad transfer Justin Mutz. So you wonder if that might be the final piece to the puzzle, so to speak.
I think somebody said he had 2 years to play, maybe.
Yeah,
I wonder if Joe Bamisil is the final piece of the puzzle. He continues to get rave reviews.
Yeah.
Every time his name comes up on the board, the people that have seen him play are just...
He's going to be rusty, though. He missed his senior season.
Yeah.
But yes, first of all, if you've got a guy who's averaging over 8 rebounds a game, and his last name is Mutz, I mean, that's just perfect, man. I've always wanted, a junkyard dog on the boards, right?
Is it M-U-T-Z?
No, M-U-T-T-S.
Oh, that's perfect.
That's perfect.
By the way, as I'm about to transition over to Malcolm, Naquan Brown tweeted 1 minute ago his final 6. I always have Twitter up, folks. So LSU, Penn State, Pitt. As I continue to watch this video, trying to fast forward, I'm assuming there's Virginia Tech in there at number 4. It's a very well done video. So 1 minute ago, that's why I have Twitter up, folks. Absolutely. If you ever wonder what I'm doing, just in case we get some news.
Mutz is 6'7", 220.
That's fine. That's fine. He can play the 4. Maybe the 3. I don't know what his skill set is, but I like those. I like those guys that are like Bryant Matthews size that you could play at either the 3 or the 4.
Bryant Matthews, man.
Yeah.
Before Chris's stomach really starts to rumble
it's
here
on
the show,
in a few minutes.
Let's turn it over to the best producer in the land who has sat there so patiently, just typing away with a smile on his face. He
Drinking his Diet Mountain Dew.
Malcolm Stewart. How you doing, Malcolm?
Doing well. Oh, I forgot to move my mic.
Hey, there we go. Hold
on. Only question we've got so far that we didn't go over is from Janet E. Crowder. What do y'all think of the plan to limit attendance at the football games this fall?
Is there a plan?
Yeah. I mean, there are plans based on different things, I guess, but they won't know for another month or maybe a little more. Like what Babcock said in the town hall on Friday night, that they're not going to know anything about possible attendance levels until probably early July. So there's going to be another month of speculation about this.
It's tough because there's so much logistics involved.
There's so many logistics involved
that you can't wait until like August 15th.
Right.
You got to come up with a system to prioritize people, decide who's going to see what games.
I mean, do you know how much money is going to would be spent shipping out tickets to people who a month later you find out we don't have room for them in the stadium.
Man,
right.
I'm so glad I don't have to do that job.
From a logistical standpoint, there's so much. I think they have several plans based on a lot of different factors, but they're not going to know for another month or so what's going to happen there.
Yeah. So there's not a whole lot you can say about it. I just, it's likely going to require some people to make some sacrifices and not be able to see games that they want to see.
No question.
And, I don't know what to say about that. You would like to think that everybody would just keep a stiff upper lip and suck it up and not complain, but there will be some people who will wield a little bit more influence behind the scenes, maybe. It's just like I said, logistics. It's just a lot for an athletic department to deal with beyond what they usually have to deal with.
Right.
So,
going off of that, Max Hafer, should students be given priority access to lane?
Should they? I mean, not if you want to make the most amount of money possible in a year where you might not have enough money.
Are you all going to be mingling on Center Street before you come over?
Are you going to leave at halftime? Because if they all leave at halftime, then you might as well give them to the fans that donate money, right? Because
given priority.
All right, so think about it. Let's say, I don't know, you're allowed in at 1/3 capacity or something like that. I'm not going to make the cut based on my Hokie Club level and everything like that.
You'll get to see the Liberty game.
But the thing is, like, I personally would not make the cut. I don't know if my parents would or not, but there's going to be certain people in there that are going to be over the age of 65 that do make the cut, and they're going to be like, you know what, I'm not going to go.
Wow.
And so that their tickets might get dropped down to me or something like that. Well, again, I have no idea the logistics of this stuff. There's just way too much that I can't even possibly think about.
Yeah, but it is an excellent question. Where do the students fit in this? Because they're your future donors. Mm-hmm. They make a lot of the noise. They bring a lot of the energy. I don't, you can't pack them all into the north end zone.
I mean, that needed to end anyway, because I'm very much in fear that the north end zone is going to collapse at some point because they all crowd in there. And
they need somebody to drop a bunch of money on them and turn that thing into concrete.
Exactly. Yeah, that'd be great.
So, I don't know. We don't have an answer for that one either.
Right. And that's another thing, man. Student attendance across the country has been in decline. And this is not just a Virginia Tech thing with kids leaving at halftime and everything.
We had a full podcast about that at one point.
Yeah, we absolutely.
Which you can go back on our archive on YouTube, folks. Go through the old,
Yeah.
Malcolm, have you bought a season ticket yet?
I think I did. I think I bought them the day they became available.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, if students aren't allowed in at full capacity this year, and you just get them more and more used to watching the game on TV and just having a kegger in their backyard.
That's a risky run.
Yeah.
And that's actually true of the general populace.
That's true of everybody, absolutely.
And that's true of everything. There's that whole thing of how the coronavirus and COVID-19 are going to change the world forever. And I was talking to somebody down the hall here in the CRC, and he said, I don't know how many people work down the hall. Let's say it's 12 people. 2 of them have been coming in regularly. And the other 10 have been working from home. And he said, and they've been doing a great job. And he said, when you look at the Corporate Research Center, the Corporate Research Center recently had its, I can't find the correct term I'm looking for, the manager, Joe Meredith, who has run the CRC for many years, has retired, and they're looking for his replacement. And one of the discussions that has occurred is How is this going to affect the future of the corporate research center? Are people discovering, hey, do I really need all this square footage? Or
all this office space that is getting built around the country and everything? It's going to be a lot of empty buildings because people are working it from home. I mean, I know the first 2 or 3 weeks of all this whole thing, you were working from home. I kept coming into the office. I was pretty much the whole person in the entire building. I had my own castle over here, man.
Chris and I have been coming in pretty much every day because no one else is.
No one else
safe
is.
as staying at home.
But when you were working in Radford and I was working here, we were just as cohesive as far as getting articles posted. I'd just text him and say, yo, I just saved an article. Can you go edit it? And he would go edit it, and I would post it. I mean, it was nothing had really changed. We weren't seeing each other every day, but we were communicating. So, it's just so many things are going to change.
So, anyway, but the question was
students at football games.
And so,
I mean, I personally would think, like, if whatever percentage of, let's say I have no idea what number it's going to be. Let's say it's 30%. And that's 30% across the board. Students, regular fans, whatever. I would think it would be 30% across the board for everybody.
Yeah, so I don't think they're going to be treated any differently. Is the thing.
Good question.
And they won't let them set them all in the north end zone either. Because, if 30%, I guess, could all fit in the north end zone, but then they're not socially distanced, right? So,
but they're going to cluster anyway.
Right.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's football identity is Enter Sandman, the entrance.
Yeah.
That's what Virginia Tech is known for. Like, if you asked a random person off the street, that's what they would say. And just think about it, man. That's going to be a whole season, and it might not. The team running on the field to Enter Sandman to an empty stadium.
Yeah, Penn State is not going to face a full-throated Lane Stadium, which is a shame.
And then Virginia Tech will go back up there in 2025 and face 108,000 people. Yeah,
Beaver Stadium.
All
right, anything else, Malcolm?
One more from Janet Crowder that we should talk about. How weird is it that we have a Wahoo leaving UVA and coming to Tech?
You can't make that up, man.
Chris read up on this yesterday. So fill everybody in on what this is.
So this kid started as a freshman at long snapper for UVA this past year. He's transferring to Virginia Tech. The guy's a direct descendant of Thomas Jefferson. So, like, he is UVA embodied. And the embodiment of the University.
If you want to be an All-American, you can't let your mouth hang open like that.
I just did not realize. I saw the news. I didn't see that he was a direct descendant of Thomas Jefferson.
It is on his biography on the UVA football website. And he's transferring from UVA to Virginia Tech. You can't make this stuff up.
And is he going from being a scholarship player to being a walk-on?
It's probably the other way around, if I had to guess. Why would you change schools like that if you're already a starter?
I must be thinking of somebody else.
It's Stout all over again. Remember Jordan Stout, Virginia Tech's kicker?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to Penn State, set a school record for like the 58-yard field goal.
Yeah, right, and became their kickoff specialist. I mean, he didn't get a scholarship.
He went to get a scholarship.
He went to get a scholarship, right. So it could very well be that situation here. Not everybody puts every specialist on scholarship.
And
like
he
Frank Beamer
is a long snapper?
He is a long snapper. So he'd have to sit out this year. I believe Virginia Tech's long snapper
Oscar
Shadley is a senior this year. So this guy would take over as a redshirt sophomore or whatever the year after that.
He better not make a bad snap against UVA.
Well, the joke on the board yesterday by Stork was this is a plant.
It's a plant.
Like, he's going to come out in a big play 2 years from now in the Tech UVA game and just snap it over the punter's head.
That's right.
Right out of the back of the end zone or something like that.
Oh my gosh, that's a great way to close the podcast. Yeah. I saw that news. I just did not see the Thomas Jefferson part. That is, it's crazy enough to get someone to transfer from UVA to Tech, but
2020 is crazy, man.
And we're only about halfway through it, so we've got more to go, and we've got more Tech Sideline.
That's almost worth losing the Commonwealth Cup over. I mean, we can look at UVA fans and be like, man, Thomas Jefferson's great grandson would rather go to Virginia Tech. After spending a year at UVA, he would rather go to Virginia Tech.
Yeah. And beating Virginia Tech his first year there.
He's going to be the only player in the history of the world to win the Commonwealth Cup for both teams.
Wow, that's it.
For sure, that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, we are about almost 90 minutes into this podcast, and it flew by. It really did, as it always does here on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you, Malcolm, for sitting there so patiently and chiming in with the viewers. That's one thing I love to do. Go back and watch the comments on Facebook, and then see Malcolm interact with everybody on Facebook. So,
as Tech Sideline, right?
Yeah, as Tech Sideline, correct. Yeah. So, any final thoughts before we sign off here, gentlemen?
Well, I got to go to the bar on Friday night, and I got to go to the gym this morning. So everything's almost back to normal.
Things are good.
If I could just go on vacation, I'd be happy.
And I hit a deer last night with my truck.
Did you really?
No.
Oh,
you
man.
know, it's just,
it didn't even scratch your truck, did it?
Well, it actually those GMC Sierras have a big plastic grill on them, and so I'm driving down a backcountry road, and I see a couple of deer on the side of the road, and you know that old Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, when the knight says he chose poorly, the deer chose poorly. It went in the wrong direction, and I got him square with the grill, and I hit the brakes, so I didn't hit him going 50 or 60 miles an hour. Near as I can tell, it just broke the grill, and so I got home, and I reach into my grill, and I start pulling out all these plastic parts. I pulled out 16 pieces of plastic that are apparently part of some louver system behind the grill that I don't know what it does. So
apparently it's unnecessary.
Yeah, because I drove to work this morning, no problem.
I'm going to close with a quote from Will that he told me back in, was it September or October, when the sports car had the
Miata.
Miata. And Will, we're talking about the car. Will looks at me and he says, "I'm getting a truck, and I'm going to make sure I'm not losing the battle the next time."
I said, next time I hit something, I win. and I can tell you,
there you go.
It's much less terrifying to hit Bambi with your full-size pickup truck than it would have been with the Miata. I used to actually, so this is on the way to and from my dad's lake house, which is some backcountry road driving. I used to worry that in the Miata that I was going to hit a deer one time and it was going to roll up into the cabin, if you want to call it that, into the cockpit of the Miata, so to speak. I mean, we've all seen Tommy Boy where the deer.
I was just about to bring that up. Yeah.
Fortunately,
you didn't have a back seat. You would have to put him in the passenger seat in the Miata.
Fortunately, this did not happen. So
excellent movie, Tommy Boy. Yeah. Gosh, hey, I have seen that. For those that always comment, as I haven't seen that, I have seen Tommy Boy, and I love that movie. So
it's a great movie.
And Office Space. All right, well, thanks so much to everybody for watching or listening. A reminder, you can access episode 129 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, all other episodes on our YouTube page, our SoundCloud page, our Apple Podcast page, as well as Facebook. So I hope you'll go back and watch. Hope you can join us next time. And thanks so much for being with us. That'll do it for us. For the managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart.
And everybody's All-American, Evan Hughes.
I am your proud podcast host, Evan Hughes, saying so long. Thanks so much for listening and watching to episode 129 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Have a great week, Hokies.